Oh, hello. Welcome back to the Wednesday show. Welcome to Plus 2 Comedy Extra. I'm your host, as always, artist Noah Houlihan. Yes, and this is another monthly challenge video. I was challenged by Modifier John for every day in February to deface a $1 bill with whatever artistic expression felt like coming out of my hands. Deface is not a word that I would choose to use for my art. I would say that I improved the $1 bill. So please, go on this journey with me as I open the art gallery for the first time and we take a look at my art over the month of February. We begin our gallery with a pirate. I chose the pirate because I believe that when every artist is tasked with the chance to deface a face, the mind immediately goes to pirate. So rather than fight it and always have that nagging me in the back of my mind, I decided to open with pirate, which allowed me the freedom to be more creative as I went on. That brought me to the second, which is of course Groundhog's Day, and I have here a very pink groundhog. I know that hedgehogs are blue, so I believe groundhogs are pink. And for this one, I tried to do very harsh strokes to create kind of a feeling of fur. And I also included the shadow because he did indeed see his shadow this year. Punxsutawney Phil, the most famous weatherman. That brings us to Wizard U. We were at Wizard U up in New York, so I of course drew Harry Potter. Here you may notice that I, for the first time, started to experiment with blending colors, blending the pink with the blue to create a very unique looking robe, very magical looking robe. You may also notice that at this time, I only had two colors to work with, just blue and pink. So while I kind of confined myself to the ways I could express myself, I had to fight to get out of the box to create more stunning visual work. So I liked working within the means of just the two colors. Then it was Super Bowl Sunday, so I of course went with a football player. I do not believe that there are any football players out there with a pink face mask, but in my world, in my art, there is. So when I went out shopping for Super Bowl snacks, I did pick up some nicer pens, some fine-tipped Sharpies, so I could do more precise work. And this is really how I was feeling after winning the Super Bowl. You may notice with this one, I went with no colors at all. And the eyes were originally swirls to imply sort of a drunkenness. And then I changed them to X's for kind of a deadness, because that's how I was feeling after the party that was the Super Bowl. Go Birds. So this is again me just experimenting more with my black. I didn't want color. I went color very early on, so we're going strictly black now. And here I've made George a ninja. And I think since he snuck across the Delaware on Christmas Day, he's a very sneaky man, that perhaps a ninja would be his spirit animal. So I was glad that I could bring that out of George through my work here. And then I attempted to turn a $1 bill into a $5 bill and put Abe Lincoln on there. This didn't work. It is still, in fact, considered a $1 bill. So then, since that was such a devious thing to do, I felt a lot of evil within me. And I went with the devil. I really like the goatee here. I like how it's sporadic and imperfect, kind of like how facial hair tends to grow, at least on me. And I like the 3D aspect here, that the pitchfork, the handle is missing, but the fork is actually poking out. I like that. It gives it a little bit more depth that way. Then I went with a bandit. So here he is wearing a slightly blacker turtleneck, and kind of looks like the Repo Man from the WWF. Next, we zoom out a little bit, so we have the Dark Knight here. Here I'm really making the discovery. I'm not implementing it yet, but I'm making the discovery of the importance of using negative space. Really here the focus here is the mouth and the eyes, and they actually distract about how terrible the bat suit actually looks. So as I move forward, I try to incorporate negative space a little bit more in my work. That brings us to Valentine's Day, and on Valentine's Day, Cupid's arrow went true and went directly through the brain of George Washington here, causing his heart to beat out of his chest and his tongue to fall out of his mouth, perhaps implying that he has now seen the love of his life, or perhaps is suffering irreparable brain damage. Then I went with Mario here, once again just trying to include more fine details here. You may notice the white of the buttons being located on the white of where George Washington is. So this is me incorporating negative space and trying to go with something more iconic here. Then I went with Rey Mysterio. Rey Mysterio, this may be my favorite of all of my works here. I just like the use of colors. The only colors I had access to were pink, green, black, and orange, and as you will see, the orange doesn't come up very well. Because I went with a cowboy, and the orange was just so light and that everything kind of shone through it. So I kind of just gave up on this piece. I didn't care for it, and I didn't feel like improving it. So I left it pretty much unfinished. So then we have Gene Simmons here. You may notice that there's a circular motion with the hair. You have to really look at the fine details here, trying to create that curve here. And also there's just a layer of pink over top of it, kind of to give it that shine that Gene Simmons has. Of course, George is pretty white himself, so it already looked like he was wearing the makeup. So the dark and the contrast to his white skin really pops the white. And I also made a little bit darker on the nose. The tongue is not as far out as it was when George was in love, though. Then that brings us to the 19th, which was my birthday, which I didn't have a lot of time to do. So I just did a party hat and one of those noisemaker things. Here's where I tried to get really bold. This was supposed to be an astronaut, and the mask of the astronaut, the helmet, you can never see the face of the person inside, so I tried using negative space to kind of create this feeling of him being in space. That's why I included the dark background. I tried to make it look like he was wearing a backpack. Not my most successful. There was just not enough white to really create that feeling of astronaut that I wanted to get here. So it just looks like he has one giant eye. And as you can see, I was very upset with my previous work, so I went with something a little bit more simplistic here. Of course, this dollar is actually more faded and would have been more suited for the astronaut. Because if you go back to the astronaut, it actually is very dark. So I kind of, in my mind, put these pieces together as they believe they should be each other. Then I went with Scrooge McDuck. Trying to go a little bit more out of the box here, thinking about money and things like that. Scrooge McDuck's hat is actually blue, but since I didn't have access to that, I went with green. I think it adds a little something to it. I like it a lot, actually. Then I tried to go with an anime girl, so this is an anime George Washington that is very surprised by something here. There's a touch of green in his eyes, but I think that's lost as the hair steals so much of the focus here. So then I wanted to go with a little bit more dignified. I went with the fez. Here, I think the blackness of the background actually kind of plays off as a nice stripe on the fez. So again, using that, what the dollar has already provided to me as the artist, and just kind of putting the pieces together. Then I decided to go with Jason Voorhees here. I tried to do the effect with the machete. I'm not quite happy with the machete, but I think the mask is fantastic. I've been playing a lot of Friday the 13th, so it's kind of been fresh in my mind. so I just needed to express myself this way. And I actually find him quite creepy. I think that was very well done. Then I noticed that George's mouth was very straight across, so I tried to think of a character that's, made up of line segments, and I decided to do Brock from Pokemon. Luckily, that is a character that I had the colors for. Usually his hair is not as dark, but due to the fact that the orange does not really work as well as I'd hoped, I decided to go completely dark with Brock's hair here, and I think it's a good decision. I think it's pretty clear who that is, and it's one of the better transformations of George Washington. So here I wanted to bring George more to the focus here, so I beat George up. So here he's got a black eye, he's got a cut. He's got an ice bag on his head. It's a little hard to see here. But George was a fighter, and I wanted to really bring that out of him. And then finally, I have Guy Fawkes. I thought this was an interesting parallel to put a British anarchist, basically, on the face of one of the first British anarchists, George Washington. So I thought this piece really says a lot about the spirit of George Washington and his strength and leadership. That is some good art. Now, I wanted to be able to look back and kind of see perhaps a progression. And you can see, if you look through it, there are times where I am taking a risk, trying something a little bit more advanced, past my artistic skills. And you can see when they work, I continue to take that risk. And then you will see that when I fail, I immediately draw something that's more toned back, something a little easier, something I could, really get away with almost. So you can see throughout the progression of my art that there's a lot of ups and downs. And you see when there is a failure, it is immediately met with a very simple drawing, simply to get my confidence back up. I think going further as an artist, I'm going to try to take more risks and not dwell on mistakes. You might also notice that there are 28 days in February and not $28. Well, I think I spent some of them. I know I did them. Like, there was one that was supposed to be like Doki Doki Literature Club that I did, and there was a Joker one, because the $1 bill, it's like a real obvious joke. But I don't know what happened to them. So I think I spent some of my art. But that being said, I will be spending all of these dollars, so be sure to keep an eye out for my artwork. It may be in your change next time you go to Rite Aid. So if you ever find one of my dollars, please leave a comment below. If you want to tell me what your favorite dollar was, please comment below. And if you have an idea for a month-long challenge, then please comment below. Whatever you feel, though, make sure you subscribe to Plus 2 Comedy for more insane content like this, and also the home of the Plus 2 Comedy Podcast. Thank you so much for watching. Cheers. Vanilla Coke Zero.